Millionaire mom sees black waiter teaching her autistic son to speak. What he does next changes everything. "Get this man away from my son," she said. She was a millionaire single mom raising a nonverbal autistic son with all the resources money could buy, but nothing seemed to help. Then one ordinary afternoon at a diner, a young black waiter knelt beside her son and spoke to him like no one ever had. And what happened next changed their lives forever. This is a story of unexpected connection, healing, and a love that rewrote everything. Don't miss a second of it. Please support us by subscribing to our channel and tell us where you are watching from. It was a crisp Monday morning in Seattle when Vanessa Caldwell parked her white Tesla in front of Tide and Time, a high-end seafood restaurant on the waterfront. Her 6-year-old son, Mason, sat silently in the back seat, his brown eyes fixated on the clouds outside. Vanessa glanced at him through the rearview mirror. No words, no reaction, just silence, like always. Vanessa was a 34-year-old tech entrepreneur who had built a multi-million-dollar wellness app from her garage. People admired her confidence, her business acumen, her wardrobe. But no one knew how deeply lonely she felt, especially when it came to raising Mason. Her ex-husband bailed out after the autism diagnosis, claiming it was too complicated. Since then, it had just been her and Mason, and a growing number of therapists, specialists, and disappointment. She took Mason's hand gently as they walked into the restaurant. They'd been to so many of these places lately, trying to coax him into new experiences. His therapist said exposure could spark language development. Vanessa wasn't convinced, but she was desperate. Inside, the restaurant buzzed with polite chatter and the clinking of silverware. As they were being seated, Vanessa couldn't help but notice the waiter assigned to them. He was a tall young man, probably in his early 20s, with dark skin and warm eyes. His name tag read Julian. "Good morning, I'm Julian. I'll be taking care of you two today," he said with a bright, genuine smile. Then he looked down at Mason, who didn't acknowledge him. Vanessa gave her usual polite disclaimer. "My son is nonverbal. He's on the spectrum, so just ignore him if he doesn't respond." Julian didn't look bothered at all. Instead, he knelt down to Mason's eye level. "Hey, buddy," he said softly, not too loud, not too slow, just right. "You like fish sticks? Or maybe mac and cheese?" Vanessa tensed. Most people got awkward or forced when talking to Mason, but Julian's tone wasn't pitying or exaggerated. It was like he was talking to a kid, a regular kid. Mason didn't answer, of course, but he tilted his head toward Julian, then looked away. That alone was rare. Vanessa ordered her usual kale salad and a grilled cheese for Mason. As Julian disappeared into the kitchen, she felt a strange warmth in her chest. Something about him was different. A few minutes later, Julian returned, not with food, but with 2 paper napkins and a crayon. He handed one napkin and the crayon to Mason. "Want to draw with me?" he asked casually, beginning to doodle on his napkin. Just a silly fish with sunglasses. Vanessa opened her mouth to intervene, to say, "Don't bother, he won't respond." But before she could, Mason reached out for the crayon. He didn't draw anything, he just held it. But Vanessa nearly dropped her glass of sparkling water. It was the first time in weeks Mason had reached for anything on his own. Julian just grinned and whispered, "We'll make a fish artist out of you yet." And in that moment, something began to shift. The next day, Vanessa found herself back at Tide and Time. Something she never did, returned to the same place 2 days in a row. But she couldn't stop thinking about the way Mason had reached for that crayon. It wasn't just a random movement. It felt intentional, purposeful. She told herself it was probably a fluke. Maybe Mason had just liked the color, or maybe he was reacting to the texture of the paper. Still, something in her gut told her to go back. And Vanessa had long ago learned to trust her instincts. After all, they helped her build an empire. Julian wasn't expecting them when they walked in, but the moment he saw Mason, his whole face lit up. "Hey, my little artist showed up again," Julian said, crouching beside the boy like they were old friends. "You ready to draw part 2? Vanessa gave a small smile. "I'm not sure why we're back. Maybe I just needed to see something good again." Julian gave her a soft, understanding nod. Then let's make something good. This time, Julian brought out a small set of colored pencils from his backpack during a lull in orders. Don't tell my boss, he joked, holding a finger to his lips. These are for my art classes, but I think Mason's ready for the big leagues. Mason watched him with mild curiosity. Julian gently rolled a red pencil across the table to him. Then he took a blue one and began drawing waves. Let's make an ocean, Julian said, more to Mason than Vanessa. You can pick the next color. Vanessa sipped her coffee slowly, watching in disbelief as Mason's fingers curled around the red pencil. He tapped it once against the paper. No scribbles, no lines. But he tapped it, then tapped again. Julian responded by drawing a red fish where Mason tapped. Nice choice. A red snapper. Bold. It wasn't a conversation, but it was the closest thing to an exchange Mason had ever had with a stranger. Vanessa felt a lump forming in her throat. She turned her face away, blinking hard. How do you do that? She asked Julian quietly. He shrugged. I've got a cousin who's nonverbal. Grew up with him. Learned that sometimes the words don't matter as much as the attention you give. Vanessa looked at him like she was seeing him for the first time. Not just a waiter, not just a guy with a nice smile, but someone who understood, deeply, intuitively, what Mason needed. That afternoon, they stayed longer than they planned. Mason didn't speak, but he didn't withdraw either. He held a pencil. He made eye contact. He even nudged the napkin toward Julian at one point, like he wanted him to keep drawing. Vanessa left a $200 tip quietly without saying anything. As she walked to the car holding Mason's hand, she looked back once. Julian was watching them from the door, smiling like he knew they'd be back. And in her heart, Vanessa knew it too. By the end of the week, Vanessa and Mason had been to Tide in Time 4 times. Each visit was more surprising than the last. Vanessa had barely mentioned it to anyone. Her friends, Mason's therapists, even her assistant at work, because she wasn't sure how to explain it. How do you tell people that a waiter was connecting with your son more than the dozen professionals you've paid over the years? On Friday, she decided to test it. She arrived earlier than usual, just as the lunch crowd was thinning. Mason clung to his stuffed elephant, his steps hesitant. But when they walked through the restaurant doors and he spotted Julian, his body eased. His fingers loosened around the toy. His head lifted. Julian came over grinning like they were teammates meeting for another mission. Hey Mason, I saved our usual table, he said, leading them to the cozy corner booth by the window. Once seated, Julian didn't ask what they wanted. Instead, he pulled out a little magnetic drawing board from his apron pocket. Thought we'd try something new today, he said, sliding it over to Mason. Vanessa watched closely. Her son stared at the board, then ran his fingers along the plastic edges. Julian picked up the stylus and drew a dog. Simple lines, floppy ears, big smile. This is Buddy, he said. He doesn't know how to bark yet. Think you could help him out? Mason looked at the drawing for a few seconds. Then he did something that stunned both adults. He pointed to his own mouth. Julian's eyebrows shot up. You want to make the sound? Vanessa sat frozen, breath caught in her chest. Mason opened his mouth slightly, then closed it, then again. No sound came, but his lips moved. He was trying. Julian smiled, but he didn't make a big deal out of it. He just drew another animal, a cat this time. Okay, this one meows. Want to try that one? Mason nodded. Actually nodded. Vanessa covered her mouth. Tears pooled in her eyes. You're amazing, she whispered to Julian, once Mason became focused on copying meowing sounds softly under his breath. I don't know what you're doing, but it's working. Julian kept his eyes on Mason, but his voice was calm and clear. He just needed someone who wasn't trying to fix him. Just join him. That night, Vanessa couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the scene in her mind. Mason pointing, nodding, trying. She sent a video clip to Dr. Reeves, Mason's speech therapist, who replied with disbelief, "Who is that man? I need to meet him." But Vanessa wasn't thinking about therapy appointments anymore. She was thinking about hope, and for the first time in years, it didn't feel foolish. At breakfast the next morning, Mason picked up his spoon, turned to his mother, and whispered, "Dog." It was one word, just one. but it shook her to her core. He spoke, and she knew. This wasn't just a breakthrough for Mason. It was the beginning of something much, much bigger. Julian wasn't supposed to work weekends, but when he saw Vanessa's name on the reservation list for Saturday morning, he swapped shifts with another waiter and showed up anyway. "Didn't want to miss my boy's progress," he said when Vanessa spotted him at their usual booth. "Besides, I had a feeling today was going to be big." He wasn't wrong. The moment Mason sat down, he pulled the magnetic drawing board out of Julian's backpack without asking. His first independent action in a public space. Then he drew a wobbly shape. It wasn't clear what it was, but Mason was focused, lips pressed tight, his small hand gripping the stylus like it held the key to a secret world. Julian leaned in, squinting dramatically. "Is that a spaceship?" Mason shook his head. Julian tried again. "A pancake? A balloon?" "No," Mason mumbled. Vanessa's heart nearly burst. She'd heard him speak the word dog the day before. But this was different. This was a reply, a correction. Julian just smiled. "You'll have to show me then." Vanessa watched in awe as her son slowly added a tail and ears to the shape. "Dog," he whispered again. Julian chuckled. "That's Buddy, huh? I should have known." After they ordered, Julian sat down at the edge of their booth while another waiter covered his tables. "Vanessa, can I ask you something?" he said cautiously. "I know this might be overstepping, but I've been thinking, I want to help Mason more, like outside the restaurant." Vanessa blinked. "You mean like tutoring?" "Kind of. More like mentoring. Maybe a couple hours on weekends. I could teach through play, art, music, stuff I've seen work with my cousin." She studied him. He wasn't asking for money. He wasn't selling anything. And more importantly, Mason was now humming softly next to them, completely at peace. "I'd pay you, of course," she said. "Whatever your rate is." Julian shook his head. "I'm not doing it for that." There was something in his tone, something deeper than kindness, something personal. "Julian," Vanessa asked, lowering her voice, "you mentioned your cousin before. Was he like Mason?" Julian stared at the table for a second, then nodded. "Yeah, Elijah, nonverbal. We grew up like brothers. Nobody understood him, not even his mom sometimes. But I did. We had our own language, you know, through drawing mostly." Vanessa could feel the pain behind his words. "What happened to him?" Julian's eyes dimmed. "He passed when we were 15. Heart condition. They didn't catch it in time." There was a long, quiet pause. "I couldn't help him the way I wanted to," he said, voice thick. "But maybe I can help Mason." Vanessa's throat tightened. She reached across the table and touched his hand. "You already are." From the corner of her eye, she saw Mason hold up the drawing board, a big scribbly heart in the center. No one taught him that. He just felt it. Julian smiled and said softly, "Looks like he gets it too." It was Sunday afternoon when Julian visited Vanessa's home for the first time. He pulled up to a modern house tucked behind tall trees in a quiet Houston suburb. The driveway alone was longer than his entire apartment block. Still, Julian didn't feel intimidated. He was here for Mason. Vanessa greeted him at the door with a rare, genuine smile. "Thanks for coming. He's been asking for you." Well, in his way. Mason appeared in the hallway holding a book, The Very Hungry Caterpillar. He walked up to Julian and gently pressed it into his hand. "Story time already?" Julian chuckled. "You've got good taste, buddy." They headed out to the backyard where the sun was warm and the wind carried the scent of fresh jasmine. Mason loved it out there, especially under the big oak tree where he kept his chalk and building blocks. Vanessa stayed inside, watching from the kitchen window. For the first time in a long while, she felt safe letting someone else take the lead with Mason. Julian sat cross-legged in the grass, reading the book slowly, pausing after every page. "And on Sunday, the caterpillar was full," Mason whispered, finishing the line. Julian looked up, stunned. "Yeah," he said with a grin. "He was." They moved on to a word game next. Julian laid out a few picture cards, apple, dog, sun, train, and placed matching word cards nearby. Mason had never responded to this activity before. Not in therapy, not at school, not even at home. but now he reached out with a focused expression and slid the word son under the right image. Julian clapped. "You're on fire today, kid." Then came the biggest surprise. Julian drew a smiley face on the chalkboard and said, "How do you feel today, Mason?" The boy hesitated, picked up the chalk, and drew his own face. The lines were shaky, but there was a small smile. Then he looked Julian straight in the eyes and said, "Happy." From the kitchen, Vanessa dropped her coffee mug. She ran outside, barefoot, eyes wide. "What did he just say?" Julian looked up calmly. "He said he's happy." Vanessa knelt next to her son, hands trembling. "Mason, baby, can you say it again?" But Mason had already gone back to his chalk, humming a little song under his breath, completely content. Julian stood and gently touched Vanessa's shoulder. "It'll come again. He's finding his voice. You just have to let it grow." Tears spilled freely down her face. "You don't understand. He's never used a word like that before. Not a feeling. That's new." Julian smiled. "He's not just learning to talk. He's learning to feel safe enough to talk." Vanessa looked at him, overwhelmed by gratitude. That night after Julian left, she tucked Mason into bed and whispered, "You're amazing." And for the first time ever, her son looked her in the eye and whispered back, "Mom." It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The following week, Vanessa floated through her workdays like a woman in a dream. Every time she walked past Mason's bedroom, she'd hear little whispers, words, fragments of songs, even made-up conversations between his stuffed animals. He wasn't just repeating anymore. He was expressing, imagining. And every time she thought about it, she saw Julian's face. One evening, she called him. "You busy?" "Just folding laundry and listening to jazz," he replied. "So basically, no." She hesitated. "I need a favor. It's kind of unusual." "Unusual's my middle name." Vanessa laughed. "There's a charity gala this Friday. It's a fundraiser for autism awareness. I'm on the board and they want me to speak. But honestly, I don't think I can do it without Mason being part of it. And he won't go if you're not there." Julian went quiet for a second. "You want me to come to a millionaire fundraiser in my only pair of dress shoes?" "I'll buy you a suit," she said, half joking, half serious. "Only if it's velvet." She laughed again. "Deal." Friday came quickly. Mason wore a tiny navy blue tuxedo and held onto Julian's hand the entire ride there. The event was at the downtown art museum, packed with polished guests and soft music echoing off marble walls. Vanessa arrived in a sleek black gown, her usual corporate armor replaced with warmth and confidence. The gala's theme was Finding Voices, and Vanessa's speech was scheduled just after dinner. As she took the stage, she scanned the crowd for one familiar face and found Julian near the front, Mason on his lap, headphones over his ears, and a toy train in his hand. Vanessa gripped the microphone. "I used to believe money could solve anything," she began. "Therapy, school, specialists. I gave my son the best resources, but he still lived in silence until someone walked into our lives and, without degrees, without training, saw him, spoke to him, listened." She paused, voice catching in her throat. "My son said the word happy for the first time last week, and I realized he'd never felt safe enough to use it before. That safety didn't come from therapy. It came from human connection." People in the crowd were wiping their eyes. Julian looked down at Mason and whispered, "That's your mom. She's kind of great." After the speech, people flocked to Vanessa, praising her vulnerability and asking about Mason's progress. But she kept glancing toward the corner, where Julian quietly played peekaboo with her son. Later that night, as the crowd thinned, the gala director approached Vanessa with an idea. "That young man, Julian, was it? We'd love to feature him in our community outreach initiative. Maybe even fund a local mentorship program. What he's done with Mason is extraordinary." Vanessa blinked, stunned. "You'd do that? We want to empower more kids like Mason and more mentors like Julian." She looked over at Julian again, his sleeves rolled up, smile wide, Mason asleep on his shoulder. Something told her this was just the beginning for both of them. And for the first time in years, Vanessa didn't feel alone. Spring blossomed across Houston, bringing warmer mornings and flowers blooming in the parks where Mason now loved to play. 3 months had passed since the gala, and life for Vanessa and her son had shifted into something unfamiliar, but beautiful. Normalcy, peace, growth. Julian had become a fixture in their lives, visiting every weekend and often stopping by during the week after his restaurant shifts. It started with helping Mason, but somewhere along the way he started helping Vanessa too, reminding her to breathe, laugh, live. She couldn't remember the last time her house had felt this full of joy. Mason was now using short phrases regularly, some repeated, some spontaneous. His eyes were brighter. He sought hugs. And his drawings, once just scribbles, had turned into recognizable scenes. Himself, Vanessa, and Julian beneath a big oak tree with smiles drawn across each of their faces. One Saturday morning, Julian arrived to find Mason waiting by the door with a backpack. "We going somewhere?" Julian asked with a smile. "Park," Mason said clearly, then added, "Picnic." Vanessa peeked from the kitchen, raising an eyebrow. "I didn't plan a picnic," Julian chuckled. "I think we just got invited to one." They packed sandwiches, juice boxes, and Mason's favorite sketch pad, then headed to a quiet park near the river. The sun was high, the breeze gentle. Mason ran across the grass, chasing birds and laughing with a freedom that made Vanessa's chest ache in the best way. Julian spread a blanket under a tree and sat beside Vanessa. "You know," she said, watching Mason twirl in the sunlight, "he trusts you more than he's ever trusted anyone. Not even his old therapist got this close." Julian shrugged modestly. "He doesn't need a therapist all the time. He just needs someone who sees him." She looked at him, really looked. "You've changed both our lives, Julian." He smiled. "And you changed mine. I never thought I'd do more than wait tables and sketch on napkins. Now I've got kids writing me letters, families asking for help, and people who believe in me." Vanessa reached into her bag and pulled out a folded envelope. "What's this?" he asked, confused. "Open it." Julian unfolded it carefully. Inside was a formal letter, an offer from a nonprofit autism foundation, granting him a full scholarship to earn a certification in child behavioral support. The program was created in partnership with the very charity from the gala. "They want to build a mentorship program with you as the face of it," Vanessa said. "I didn't push them. They saw the magic themselves." Julian stared at the letter, eyes glassy. "I never imagined something like this." Vanessa touched his hand. "You deserve it, and Mason isn't the only one who believes in you." For a long moment, they sat there, just watching the boy they both loved. Mason trotted over, placed a flower crown he made from dandelions on Julian's head and whispered, "Love you." Julian looked up at Vanessa, heart full. "I love you too, little man," he said. And as the three of them sat beneath that tree, the wind whispered through the leaves like a promise. This wasn't just the end of a hard chapter, it was the beginning of a beautiful new story. One built not by wealth or status, but by connection, trust, and love. What began as a chance encounter between a millionaire mom and a humble waiter turned into a life-changing journey of healing, hope, and unexpected love. Julian didn't just teach Mason to speak, he helped a family rediscover what truly matters: presence, patience, and the power of connection. And in return, he found purpose and a place where he belonged. This story reminds us that sometimes the people who change our lives the most are the ones we never saw coming. If this touched your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring, true life tales every week. Your support helps keep these stories alive.